I have finally reached the end of season 1 of Will and Grace, which means that today I'm talking about season 1, episodes 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. Usually I would only do 3 or 4 episodes in a batch, but I figured I might as well just do the final 5. These are all directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows, and in general, I liked them all. One of them wasn't the most interesting, but for the most part, I had a lot of fun. So as always, I will go through each of the episodes and share some thoughts. I won't go through everything scene by scene, but I'll talk about the key plot points. Any likes, any dislikes, no real dislikes. And we start off with season 1, episode 18, Grace Replaced. And it had a very good start. It got the song Downtown stuck in my head, though usually when I hear Downtown, I hear Willie singing it from The Simpsons, but really great song. And there are 2 parts to the narrative. One's very small, involving Jack doing community service. I loved his interactions with Karen. It was nice padding for the main narrative. The main narrative focuses on the fact that Grace has been really busy. She's not had any time to spend with Will, so Will gets a new friend. And this is a character called Val, played by Molly Shannon. And initially, I was worried that it was going off in a different direction because they meet in the laundry room, and I was concerned that Val would hit it off with Will and she'd start to spend time with him, thinking it was leading to a date or a romantic situation. But actually, she confirms quite quickly that she knew Will was gay just from the way he was acting, which maybe is a bit of a stretch, but nevertheless, we quickly learn that that's not what Val is thinking. And they spend a lot of time together. Val looks after Will when he's sick, and that's the last straw for Grace. And Grace doesn't really have a right to be annoyed because she's not making time for Will, but nevertheless, she is annoyed. She goes back to the house and, well, Val and Grace get into a bit of a fight. They drop soup on Will, and then they start ripping each other's shirts, and they end up wrestling, and it just escalated really, really quickly, and it's ridiculous, and it's really good fun. And I rather liked it. And then Grace said that she doesn't feel like she's been Will's best friend recently, and Will pointed out that it hasn't felt like she's been his best friend because she hasn't been around, which I think is an absolutely valid point. You don't get to be upset that your best friend is spending time with somebody else if you're not making time for them. So I think there are some really good messages there. Ultimately, it's a really fun episode. I have no complaints about it. Val is a great character, and I don't know if we'll ever see them again, but certainly within this episode, I rather enjoyed it. And my highlights would be certainly from the dropping of the soup until the rest of the episode played out. I rather liked it. We then come to season 1, episode 19, Will Works Out. And there are 2 main parts of the narrative, one involving Karen spending time with Grace, and it's nice to see this side of Karen, and they swap clothes at one point. It's a little bit random. It's good fun, not the most interesting, but it works well. The main narrative focuses on the fact that Jack goes to Will and Grace's gym, and I was really surprised with what happened. Jack is behaving, well, like Jack. He's very flamboyant. I don't want to say making it clear that he's gay, because you can be camp without being gay, but he's certainly behaving in a way that may make other people in the gym suspect that he's gay. And Will is really uncomfortable with this. Will, I guess, tries hard to not display anything that might be considered gay, and a lot of people he works with go to this gym. He doesn't want them to know that he is gay, which is basically the exact opposite of how Jack behaves, and I thought that was really interesting. And it's largely about how Jack perceives himself and whether or not he's actually comfortable in his own skin, and if not, what can he do to resolve that. But that's what the episode's mostly about. But there's one moment that I found to be really uncomfortable, and I think that's kind of the point. Because Will and Grace are at the gym, and Will calls Jack a derogatory term. I don't even want to say it. He called him an FAG, and I guess because Will's saying it, it's not as horrendous, I guess. If a straight character had said it, it would have been completely unacceptable. But Will saying it, I think, tells a lot about Will and how he feels within his own skin. And the worst part is that Jack heard it. They didn't realise Jack was there. And once they leave the room, we see Jack, and we know that Jack heard this. And Jack comes into the gym the next time very differently. And it's interesting to see the character being played more, I guess, stereotypically macho. Very different to what we get with Jack, which, yes, was quite funny because it was unexpected. It was very different. But to realise that Jack is doing this out of hurt because Will said something really unacceptable, gives me very mixed emotions. And Grace said something that I thought was really important, and it kind of sums everything up. She points out that the things we don't like about others are really the things we don't like about ourselves. Now, that's not to say that Will didn't like the fact that Jack was behaving in a very stereotypically gay manner. It's not the fact that he didn't like that, it's the fact that that's part of himself he's not comfortable with, so he doesn't like seeing it in Jack because it reminds him of that within himself. And I think that's really interesting. I think if we all think about it, there are probably people we think we don't like or actions we think we don't like, but when we think about it, that's actually something about ourselves we're not comfortable with. So I thought there were some really good takeaways from this, and I think there are some good messages about how not to talk about people and how not to name call because it's not very nice. Yes, some comedy, but I'd say it's also a lot more important. I think there are a lot of really strong aspects of this narrative, whether you're the Jack or the Will or indeed the Grace. I think there are some interesting thoughts about how to behave and largely how not to behave. But ultimately, if you're unhappy with somebody, look within yourself. I think that's a great takeaway. And we end the episode with them making up, which was, I think, pretty essential. So a good episode. Definitely quite unexpected in some ways, and I think ultimately some really strong takeaways. We then come to season 1, episode 20, Saving Grace, and we have a character called Nathan, played by McFarland, and he is an incredibly well-written but exceedingly annoying character. Grace wants to work for him to do his apartment, but he says that before he agrees to work with her, he wants to view her place. Which I guess makes sense. How can you trust a designer if their own home is a mess? It's kind of like, I don't know, if I were to go to a hairdresser and the hairdresser had terrible hair, like really bad condition, poorly done, I would think, how can I trust you? I'm just trying to kind of make sense of why he would want to do this. And he met Will, and he basically said to Grace, I will work with you. You can have this job if I get a date with Will. And Grace said yes without talking with Will, and Will basically has no choice because he doesn't want Grace to lose this opportunity, and he goes on a date with Will. And he was even annoying on the date. And it was very funny, very well written, but so infuriating. The cubing a chicken conversation I really liked, but it was so awkward and uncomfortable. And I have to say credit to Will for really standing up to Nathan. He didn't take his attitude, he did not accept it. And it was very fun, but really annoying as well. And, well, it turns out that while Will was out, Nathan had phoned, Grace took the call, and he's actually going to double Grace's budget. We thought he was going to fire her because the date was a disaster. Love the element of surprise there. And when Grace said she did something bad, I will say it was a little bit anticlimactic because all she did was tell Nathan that Will would go on a second date, which, yeah, she shouldn't have done, but it wasn't terrible. And, well, Will manages to find a way to make this work. He goes out with Nathan again, and he decides to come on very strongly and very eagerly to live with him, and Nathan realises he can't do this kind of cutesy attitude and calls it off. So I thought Will found a way to work this, to turn things around so that he was in control. And in general, Nathan definitely made this episode rather entertaining, but annoying at the same time. Very well written character, really great performance, absolutely hate him. And yeah, if you're Grace in this story, don't agree that your friend will go on a date with somebody just to get the job, because quite frankly, you're probably not going to enjoy working for this person anyway. If that's what it's like to get the job, imagine what it's going to be like when he's completely in control of everything. So I think there are some good takeaways there as well. In terms of being an entertaining episode, yes, it's entertaining, but at the same time, it's maybe not the most interesting story. Character-driven, very well-written character, but I think this is probably the weakest episode out of this batch. I didn't dislike it, but the story, I felt maybe just needed a little bit something else. But in general, I don't have any complaints. I guess one of the episodes has to be my least favourite, so I suppose it's this one. We then come to season 1, episode 21, Alley Cats, and Grace is getting too competitive. They're playing games at home with friends, and she becomes so competitive that people don't want to play with her anymore. And then they go bowling, and Grace tries to not be competitive, but Will realises this isn't working. So he basically says we can be competitive again, and he gets into it. And the Grace bowling is just beautifully executed, very fun, great environment, really works really well. And this might be maybe one of the only times we've been to a different set outside of the main ones. Well, we had the gym scene. Up until this point, we've mostly just been in Will and Grace's apartment and Grace's office for the most part, so it's nice to have a change of environment. And that being said, we do have occasional scenes here and there, but I wasn't expecting in the first season to go to somewhere like a bowling alley, so I thought that worked quite well. And we have a subplot that's actually quite good fun as well. Jack is teaching Karen CPR, and she actually manages to use it to save a person's life. I will say, while Karen's attitude usually is just quite funny, she does talk down to a worker in this. He's fixing the pipes or something, I can't remember exactly. But she really talks down to him, and I don't like that. It's fine and dandy to have this attitude when you're not actually communicating with other people and you're just saying these comments to your friends. But to actually degrade somebody like that, I don't like. So it was a side of Karen I didn't care for. But the fact that she was ultimately able to save their life, I suppose that kind of makes up for it to some extent, and it was good fun. And if it encourages anybody to do CPR classes, that's a great thing as well. So Alley Cats, a pretty good fun. I've just realised why it's called Alley Cats. Bowling Alley. That took me a while. It's a good fun episode. Really enjoyed it. I feel like there are people who are quite competitive who are going to be able to relate to it. I used to be really competitive to the point where I don't play trivia games because I get upset if I don't know the information, and my general knowledge is horrendous, so I'm not that great at them. So I don't like playing trivia games. I'm not competitive with board games, though. I don't care if I don't win board games. I could not care less. I could not care less if I don't win bowling. I am terrible at bowling. But trivia, yeah, that's a sore spot for me. But other than that, I think there are potentially relatable aspects, and the CPR part of the narrative, apart from Karen's attitude towards the worker, was also really enjoyable. And then we come to the end, the final episode of Season 1. Season 1, Episode 22, Object of My Rejection. And this one played out in a way I wasn't expecting. We have Danny, played by Tom Baricha, and this is Grace's ex-partner, and she went on a date with him. And then he stayed the night. And it's very clear that Grace is very confused about how she's feeling or what she should be doing. I think she went back to him because she's lonely, not because she misses him. And she doesn't know really what to do. And we then have Rosario, Karen's housekeeper, played by Shelley Morrison. And she takes her to see Will because she's going to be sent out of the country. And Will points out that other than marrying somebody, there's no immediate solution to stay in the country. And then we kind of jump forward a little bit. I feel like we were missing a scene. I feel like we jumped very quickly from that to, okay, Jack's now going to marry Rosario. I feel like something was missing there, but this is what's going to happen. Jack is going to marry Rosario so she can stay in the country. And we get to the wedding. Everything moves really, really quickly. And this played out in a way that I wasn't expecting. At the wedding, Will and Grace are arguing about Danny, and I like how everything tied together, that part of the narrative with the wedding part, and they did get married. Jack and Rosario did get married, which first of all I don't agree with. I don't agree with showcasing that, but maybe something will happen with that going forward, but I feel like showing them going through with it and actually getting married is kind of giving the wrong message. But as I said, maybe in the next season something will happen to show that actually you shouldn't marry somebody random just to stay in the country because it is kind of illegal. So I'll keep an eye out to see what happens there. And at the end of the episode, Grace and Will, having fought about Danny, kiss and make up, and it's a really beautiful moment. And they decide that they shouldn't live together anymore. And I wasn't expecting that either. I have no idea. Does this mean, and I don't want the answers, I'll find out in due course very quickly, but does this mean that they're not going to live in the same apartment anymore? Which I think is a good thing if that happens. I think that's especially one of the reasons I didn't like Grace to begin with is that she basically moved into Will's apartment and took over everything and started demanding everything. And she was just very self-centered, and it was not a good look. And I really hated her. I really hated Grace for a very long time. And I feel like getting her own apartment would be a really good idea. I don't hate her now, But I do feel like she should be able to stand on her own 2 feet now and give Will his space and give herself her own space as well. So keen to see what happens next. I have bought the box set because it was much cheaper than renting or buying every season on Prime. And I'm looking forward to finding out what's going to happen. So if I were to rank all of these episodes, I guess I'd go with... This is difficult. I think I'd go with Will Works Out, just because there were things in that I didn't expect. And I'd also go with Alley Cats. And then I'd have to go with Grace Replaced and Object of My Rejection. And then, of course, Saving Grace at the end. I don't know, very difficult actually, very difficult to rank these ones. I don't have a clear standout favourite. I think Saving Grace is my least favourite in terms of the narrative, but Nathan was a very, very well written character. So, in general, it's a good batch of episodes to begin with, or at least for about half of this first season. I had no interest in carrying on watching it. I only started watching it out of curiosity, and largely because of Grace, I didn't think I was going to carry on watching it. But after a certain point, I'm willing to admit it was after Debbie Reynolds, I decided actually I want to watch more. So looking forward to watching season 2, keen to find out if there are any changes to happen. And for now, I'm pleased to say that season 19, 20, 21 and 22 are pretty good episodes of Will and Grace, and ultimately a pretty decent end to the first season.